The wedding hall was filled with whispers instead of applause. The fragrance of roses and candles could not hide the bitterness in the air. On the stage sat a young woman in a simple white dress, her trembling hands clutching the bouquet so tightly that a petal fell to the floor. The man beside her, the groom who had promised her forever, stood frozen, his face pale with shame and fear. And then, in front of hundreds of guests, he took a step back, his words slicing through the silence like a knife, "I can't marry a cripple." For a moment, time stopped. Her mother screamed. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed. But the bride, Lina, just sat there, her paralyzed legs hidden beneath the silk fabric, her heart shattering into pieces no one could see. If you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps stories like Lina's remind the world that love still exists in the most unexpected places. Lina had not always been in a wheelchair. 2 years earlier, she was a bright, graceful woman who danced through life like she was born to do it. Her laughter could light up any room, her eyes sparkled with hope. But one rainy evening, a car speeding through a red light changed everything. She woke up in a hospital bed with tears on her mother's face and a doctor's quiet words echoing in her ears, "She may never walk again." At first, she refused to believe it. She told herself it was temporary, that she would get better. But months passed, therapy failed, and reality pressed harder each day. Friends who once visited slowly disappeared. Her fiancé, Adil, who had promised to stay by her side, in sickness and in health, began making excuses. He said he was busy. He said he was confused. Lina understood, though she pretended not to. She could feel the distance growing like a cold wind between them. Yet, when he proposed to go ahead with the wedding months later, Lina's heart dared to hope again. Maybe love really could survive tragedy. Maybe she was wrong to doubt him. She allowed herself to dream of walking, or at least rolling, down the aisle toward a man who saw her heart, not her broken body. But reality was crueler than dreams. On that fateful day, when he looked into her eyes under the soft glow of fairy lights, he saw not a bride but a burden. When he turned away, leaving her on the stage, the whispers became laughter, and pity replaced celebration. Lina sat motionless, tears streaking her makeup, feeling like her entire life had collapsed around her. For days afterward, she locked herself in her room. She didn't eat, didn't speak, barely breathed. The news had spread, paralyzed bride abandoned on wedding day. Even strangers pitied her. She became a symbol of tragedy on social media, but none of that sympathy filled the emptiness in her heart. Her mother tried to console her, but Lina's silence was her only language. Then, one afternoon, while sitting in her wheelchair by the park window, she saw a little boy chasing a paper plane. He ran, stumbled, fell, and laughed again, his joy unbroken by failure. Something about that innocent resilience touched her. The boy noticed her watching and waved shyly. His father, a tall man with tired eyes and gentle hands, came running after him, apologizing for the disturbance. That man's name was Daniel. Daniel was a single father who had lost his wife to cancer. Life had turned him into both a parent and a protector, working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. But despite his hardships, he always smiled for his son, Leo. His kindness radiated naturally, effortless, unspoken. He noticed the sadness in Lina's eyes that day, the kind of sorrow words could not hide. And without asking too much, he started to talk to her whenever he saw her by the window. Days turned into weeks. Daniel began bringing Leo to the park more often, deliberately passing by Lina's bench. Sometimes they brought her flowers from Leo's small garden, other times, Daniel brought coffee and stories about life. Lina, for the first time in months, smiled again. He never treated her like she was broken. When she spoke about her accident, he listened, not with pity, but with understanding. When she mentioned her failed wedding, his eyes softened, not out of sympathy but respect. He told her, "People often forget that strength doesn't always look like walking tall. Sometimes, it looks like choosing to smile when everything inside you hurts." That sentence stayed with her. Slowly, Lina began to rediscover herself. She started painting again, something she had loved before the accident. She even opened a small online store, selling her art. Daniel and Leo were her first customers. They became her light, her small but steady reason to look forward to tomorrow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel invited her to a small community event his son's school was hosting. Lina hesitated, she hadn't gone out in public since her wedding day. The fear of people's stares, of whispers, haunted her. But Leo insisted, his little hands clasped around hers, his innocent voice saying, "You'll be my guest of honor." She couldn't say no to that. At the event, children danced, parents laughed, and for the first time, Lina felt like she belonged again. But then, as fate would have it, Adil appeared. He was with another woman, beautiful, confident, walking gracefully beside him. Their eyes met. Adil froze, guilt flashing across his face. His new fiancée whispered something, and he just nodded, pretending not to notice Lina. But Daniel did notice. He walked up, placed a gentle hand on Lina's shoulder, and introduced himself proudly as her friend. "Lina is one of the strongest women I've ever met," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. His words, sincere and unwavering, silenced the whispers. For the first time, Lina didn't feel ashamed of who she was. She felt seen. From that night, something shifted. Daniel and Lina's bond grew deeper, built not on romance but on shared pain and healing. He helped her see that her worth wasn't tied to her body, and she helped him remember that love, in its purest form, could be reborn from brokenness. Months later, Daniel invited her to an art exhibition, her own paintings displayed in a local gallery. He had secretly contacted the organizers and arranged it all, wanting the world to see the beauty she created despite her struggles. As people admired her art, Lina felt tears well up in her eyes. It wasn't just about the paintings, it was about being alive again, about finding color after years of darkness. At the end of the evening, Daniel stood in front of everyone, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. He knelt, not out of pity, but love, and said softly, "You taught me that broken things can still create beauty. Will you let me be part of yours?" The room fell silent, and Lina's heart raced. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to find words. In that moment, she realized something profound. The man who had once walked away had freed her to find the one who would never leave. Years later, Lina and Daniel built a quiet life together, raising Leo and painting new memories. She became an inspiration to many, giving talks about self-worth, resilience, and love beyond limits. The woman once rejected for being paralyzed became a symbol of courage, proving that sometimes, the happiest endings come from the deepest heartbreaks. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps more stories of love, hope, and second chances reach those who need them most. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you believe true love sees beyond imperfections? Share your thoughts, we read every single one with gratitude. Because sometimes, the most beautiful souls are those who have been broken and chose to love anyway. Lina's life after Daniel's proposal felt like waking up from a long, dark dream. For the first time in years, her mornings began with gratitude instead of grief. The sound of Leo's laughter filled their small but cozy home, echoing through the kitchen as Daniel brewed coffee and hummed softly to an old tune. Lina would sit by the window with her sketchbook, the sunlight brushing her cheeks, and she'd think to herself, "This is what peace feels like." Her art, once born from pain, began to reflect hope. Each stroke carried pieces of her journey, her shattered heart, her quiet resilience, and the love that found her when she least expected it. Daniel often told her that her painting spoke what words could not, that every color she chose had its own heartbeat. He believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. That belief changed everything. But even after finding love again, Lina still faced the invisible weight of her past. Some nights, when Daniel and Leo had fallen asleep, she would quietly stare at her reflection, her wheelchair casting a shadow on the wall. Doubts would whisper, cruel and familiar, "You're not enough. You're a burden." Those voices were hard to silence. But Daniel always seemed to sense it, even without words. He'd hold her hand gently and remind her, "You're not broken, Lina. You're just built differently for a purpose only you can fulfill." The turning point came one autumn afternoon. Lina was invited to speak at a local women's center about overcoming adversity. She hesitated at first, public speaking terrified her. But Daniel encouraged her, saying, "You survived being humiliated in front of hundreds. You can certainly inspire a few dozen." He smiled, that steady, reassuring smile she had come to lean on. That day, she rolled onto the small stage, hands trembling. The room was quiet, filled with women of all ages, some survivors, some dreamers, some broken just like she had once been. Lina took a deep breath and began to speak. She didn't talk about self-pity or revenge or miracles. She spoke about choosing to live when life had taken everything. She told them about the accident, the betrayal, the humiliation, and then about Daniel and Leo, the light that rebuilt her from within. By the time she finished, many in the audience were crying. A woman in the front row whispered, "You gave me hope again." That single sentence wrapped around Lina's heart like a warm embrace. She realized that her scars, both seen and unseen, were not symbols of weakness but of survival. Her story spread through the community, then beyond. Local newspapers featured her journey. Invitations poured in, from schools, organizations, even TV programs. People wanted to hear from the bride who was rejected but rose again. Lina used every platform to spread her message of kindness and second chances. She always said, "If one person looks at me and decides not to give up, then my pain was not in vain." As her confidence grew, so did her family's happiness. Daniel's little bookstore, which had struggled for years, began to thrive too, thanks to Lina's art pieces displayed on its walls, drawing customers in. They renamed it The Second Chapter. It became more than just a bookstore, it was a haven for dreamers, for people healing quietly in the corners of life. On their second anniversary, Daniel surprised Lina with something she never expected. He had secretly saved money for months to buy her a custom electric wheelchair, sleek, light, and designed for outdoor trails. When he brought it out, Leo jumped with excitement, shouting, "Now we can race, Mom." Tears filled Lina's eyes as she touched the handles. It wasn't about the wheelchair, it was about being seen, understood, loved beyond words. Together, they began to travel, to parks, beaches, even mountain viewpoints accessible by ramp. Each place they visited, Lina painted. Each painting became a testament to her rebirth. One of her most famous works was titled, "The Day I Was Left," depicting a bride in a white gown sitting under a storm but surrounded by butterflies emerging from the rain. It became a symbol of hope for many. But life, as it often does, tested her once more. One winter, Daniel fell ill, nothing serious at first, just fatigue and dizziness. But doctors later diagnosed him with a heart condition that required careful management. Lina's world trembled again. The thought of losing him was unbearable. But this time, she didn't collapse under fear. She stood, or rather, rolled, forward with strength. She became his caregiver, his source of laughter, his reason to fight. They faced that chapter together, hand in hand. Leo grew into a kind, compassionate young man who admired his parents deeply. "You both taught me what real love means," he once said before heading to college. "It's not about perfect people, it's about never giving up on each other." Years later, when Lina looked back on her life, the accident, the heartbreak, the humiliation, she realized that every painful twist had guided her toward this peace. The man who left her had freed her to meet the one who would truly stay. The body that couldn't walk had taught her soul how to soar. And as she watched the sunset from her porch beside Daniel, their hands entwined, she whispered softly, "If I had walked that aisle that day, I might never have found this path." Daniel smiled, pressing her hand gently. "Sometimes," he said, "being rejected by one world means you were meant to build your own." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Let Lina and Daniel's journey remind you that love doesn't always arrive when we want it, but when we need it most. And before you leave, we'd love for you to comment below. Sparkles, what's one act of kindness or second chance that changed your life? Sparkles. Your story might be the next ripple that inspires someone else to keep believing.